What's up, addicts? Today we're going to do a top 10 countdown of the best fantasy wide receivers for 2018. So at number 10, I have T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton is a perennial wide receiver one, and granted he is a little bit boom bust, but the last time that we've seen him do this obviously was with Andrew Luck. Last year, you kind of have to throw out because without Luck, he was just not able to sustain the production that you need from a player like Hilton. So granted, he's definitely not as much of a floor guy as some of the guys that are going around him, but he has that week winning potential each week because he can just absolutely blow up on the scoreboard. And as long as Luck is healthy and all signs are pointing that Luck is back to form, then T.Y. Hilton should be a top 10 pick this year. And he's going right about there in ADP, and I think that's about right. So at number 9, we have AJ Green. So AJ Green was a little bit of a disappointment last year, but the Bengals offense as a whole was a disappointment. So they did focus this offseason on upgrading the offensive line, which is a must because last year their offensive line was so putrid that Andy Dalton just regressed terribly, couldn't do anything because he was just constantly getting killed. So if the offensive line is better, obviously people are projecting Joe Mixon to do a little bit better this year. So if the rushing game is better, the offensive line is better, then AJ Green is going to be able to get open more. There's also a lot of reports right now that John Ross is doing a lot better, so that should help make sure that they have to respect the other side of the field, and AJ Green should bounce back this year. It doesn't mean he's going to be back to where he was in his prime, but I think that he is a bargain right now. He's going in the late second, and if you can start with a great running back in AJ Green, that's a great start. Number 8, I have Mike Evans. So similarly to AJ Green, had a little bit of a down year last year, especially in the touchdown column. I don't foresee that that's going to happen again. Mike Evans is a big touchdown threat, and only having, I think, 3 touchdowns last year that's honestly unsustainable in the opposite direction. I think that it's going to bounce back up in a good way for Evans, and I think he'll also have more yards and receptions again. Last year it was just a down year. He's kind of like done a little bit of a roller coaster, but he's still their best player, and they're going to have to be fighting all season long just to stay competitive. They're in a really rough division, and the NFC as a whole is just an absolute death trap for teams. If you lose just a few too many games, you're already out of playoff contention. So the Buccaneers are going to be fighting for their life, and I think Mike Evans is going to have to be carrying a lot of that load. So number 7, we have Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is one of my favorite players in the NFL to watch, and I know he gets a bad rap for his injury history. I don't really think that it's fair, because if you look at the injuries that he had, they were all kind of freak accidents. It's not something that he's had recurring year after year. So I'm really not scared about his injury history. What I am a little bit tepid about is obviously they did draft Mike Williams last year. He was hurt for most of the year, so they didn't really get to use him. I think this year there are a lot of reports that he is getting a lot of red zone work, and they're going to really try to see what they have, and that might come at the expense of Keenan Allen. And again, anytime you have like a really good year, defenses focus on you a little bit more. So it's likely that Keenan Allen will still be a really productive fantasy player. Obviously, I have him ranked at number 7, so I think he's going to be great. But I don't know that he will be as productive as he was last year. He still has a really high floor, so that's what makes him a really good pick, because week in, week out, he still has he normally scores around 10 points at bare minimum, and he does still have a really high ceiling week to week. So that's the reason why I have him at number 7. Number 6, a very similar player, I have Michael Thomas. I have Michael Thomas just a little bit above Keenan Allen because I like the Saints as an offense better than the Chargers, and I think that again, the Drew Brees is going to be progressing in his touchdowns again this year, and I think that will come at the benefit of Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas was playing really well last year, but from a fantasy perspective, he never really had many blow-up games because he just didn't score the touchdowns, and I think that they're coming. As long as he can continue to stay healthy and play the way that he has, he is one of the better receivers in the NFL, playing with a future Hall of Fame quarterback. And I think that having him on your team is a really solid way to start. If you can pair him with a really good running back, that's a great way to start your draft. So at number 5, we have one of my favorite players in the draft this year is Davante Adams. So Davante Adams really had a great year last year from a fantasy perspective, and when you consider that he was playing for Brett Hundley for most of the year, is pretty good because Brett Hundley was awful. So this year we get Aaron Rodgers back. And with that, Davante Adams is now Aaron Rodgers' #1 target because the Packers let Jordy Nelson go. So the #1 target for Aaron Rodgers is typically a good asset for your fantasy team, and I think that Davante Adams is going to absolutely destroy in that role. He's always scored right around the double-digit touchdown mark, which I think he'll do again, and I think he'll be actually seeing an uptick in targets and receptions. So he could honestly finish the season ahead of the big 4 receivers. I think top 3 finish is in the realm of possibilities for Davante Adams. Anyway, going into the big 4 though. So at number 4, we have Julio Jones. So last year, Julio Jones had somewhat of a down year for fantasy. He was really inconsistent, although he did finish the year somewhat well. Overall, we saw the Falcons kind of regress, and a lot of that had to do with Kyle Shanahan moving on and them getting a new offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian. Now, what we've seen in the past is that Matt Ryan normally takes a year or 2 to develop under a new offensive coordinator, and last year, definitely we were expecting some regression, but where the Falcons are actually projected to go now in the second year of the Sarkisian offense, I'm actually expecting the Falcons to do a little bit better, which will bode well for Julio Jones. So last year, Julio Jones only had 3 touchdowns. That's another stat that is definitely due to regress positively. And although Julio Jones has never really been much of a week in, week out touchdown guy, he definitely can do better than 3. And I'm projecting that he will do just that. I think he's going to have a really good year. Again, he's maybe the most inconsistent week in, week out guy of the big 4, but I think that he is still going to have enough big games that you'll be very thankful to have him on your team. So number 3, we have Odell Beckham Jr., probably one of, if not the most athletic wide receivers in the entire league. Odell Beckham Jr. coming back from an injury that hampered him last year and took him out. I think the Giants are on a track to increase in offensive production this year. Obviously, they got rid of Ben McAdoo, which was a good idea. They brought on Saquon Barkley. So Odell Beckham, even though was a little inconsistent last year, was still a weekly potential league or week winner for you. And that's the reason why you draft players like Odell Beckham, because he can just absolutely light up your scoreboard, and I think that he can do that plenty of times this year. So I have him at number 3. Number 2, we have DeAndre Hopkins. So last year, DeAndre Hopkins was actually the most consistent fantasy producer. I think he only had 1 week where he did not score 10 points, and he scored 9.9. So I think he had around 30% of the target share, so that's not going to happen again. That's just unsustainable. But that doesn't mean that DeAndre Hopkins isn't good enough to continue to play week in, week out, and be one of the top fantasy producers, especially if Deshaun Watson can actually play the whole year. So I think taking him at the number 2 wide receiver spot is a great idea. I project him to finish there. I think he is one of the best receivers in the league, and he's playing with a team that likes to throw the ball and very, very likely will have double-digit touchdowns. So he just has an extremely high ceiling and a high floor. Can't really go wrong. But at number 1, there still is only one king at the wide receiver position, and that is Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, there's not really much to say. 5 years straight, he is just absolutely been a phenomenal player, future Hall of Famer. And when you have him on your team, it's just amazing to watch the points just flow and flow and flow. There's really nothing bad I can say about Antonio Brown. He has been the picture of health. Now, granted, he did have that injury last year that kept him out week 15, 16, 17, but then he came back in the playoffs and looked just as good. So I really see no reason why Antonio Brown won't lead the league in receptions and yards again, and he is always a consistent touchdown threat as well. So he's the number 1 for a reason, and if you are taking a wide receiver in the first round and you get Antonio Brown, that's the best way to start. Anyway, I hope you guys found this helpful. If you guys are curious how I have the rest of the wide receivers ranked, feel free to click the link in the description box and download my tiers. You can see how I have everybody ranked. But anyway, I'll be keeping that updated throughout the rest of preseason into the regular season. But if you guys are curious, I also have some more videos out there. Feel free to check them out. Anyway, hope you guys have a good one. Peace.